everyone, and welcome to the Mountainside Podcast. Our guest for this episode is Jeff Smith. He has a degree in agricultural business from Colorado State University. His family is the owner and operators of Colorado Craft Beef, serving high-quality food direct to consumers around the U.S. But above all that, Jeff has an extensive amount of knowledge in agriculture and where it might be headed in the future if we don't start paying attention as a society. I learned a lot during this recording. Unfortunately, we had a ton of technical issues. I swear we were being sabotaged. I'm only kidding, but it sure felt like it during this recording. All in all, we had a great time. I really enjoyed sitting down with Jeff. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
And as an ag group, as an ag community, people are sometimes okay with that.
So we weren't recording for the first 15 minutes.
No, start over?
Yeah.
I'm down. I saw you looking down and I was
Normally
like,
we don't rush into this, man. And I should know it by this interface because I didn't have my light on here. And I'm sorry. So we're going to have to go back through some of that.
That sucks because that was a great, I've never said it like that.
It'll never be the same again, right?
I'm going to try to say it again and be like, well, you should have fucking pushed the button.
We did that one other time and it was kind of a fluke thing too. So it was like technical difficulties. Okay, let's start over. We just did this awesome intro and we're not going to try to recreate that. But in general, we were talking, obviously we introduced you, Jeff. Jeff is here today to explain agriculture to us. We share a mutual friend, Jason Nauert, that hooked us up. And the main reason why I wanted to have you on the podcast today was to help educate myself in agricultural business. You have a degree from Colorado State in ag business. And I feel like there's a huge disconnection with people and food and where it actually comes from. So when you're going down the grocery store aisles, just pitching stuff in your cart, whether it's steak, broccoli, corn, maybe it's a pair of jeans, right? All that stuff has to come from a farm or a ranch. We kind of dove into that, and it's weird going back through this conversation for a second time. And we preach honesty here, so sorry we fucked that up.
It's like being married, dude.
Yeah.
Just have the conversation again.
Exactly. That's so true. You know, I think that there's that big disconnection. Prior to this, we were talking about I try as much as we can as a family to produce our own food. One, because I think it's a good life lesson for kids. I mean, that might be the only reason why I'm still hunting is because I grew up that way and I feel like there's a lot of life lessons there. But the meat is the most important thing to me. I mean, it's a huge part of my diet is elk, deer. Probably 30% of my diet comes from that, or at least meat.
Right.
For meat, it might be 50%.
Yeah. So if we look at, just the math of the elk population, like Justin just looked up, we got 1 million elk in the U.S.
Yeah.
We harvest 35 million cows in the U.S. every year. And the average person in the U.S. eats 80 pounds of beef a year.
It's staggering, man.
I think those are rookie numbers. They're down like 30 pounds in the last 40 years. Believe it or not.
Since DiCaprio made that video? Or
no, like the last 30, like since the 80s when they were talking about saturated fats and all the craziness. But chicken is double that. And chicken's some of the most differently raised protein. That's what I'll call it. The type of protein that's raised in a way that I wouldn't want to be a part of. Nothing against the chicken industry. There's some people that do some great stuff, but the commercial side is...
I've never been in, but I've driven by some of those commercial chicken farms.
Mm-hmm.
And it's staggering the size of those facilities. I can only imagine what's going on inside there.
Well, I mean, here's the thing to just break down. We talked how many cows we harvest a year. Sure. So we harvest, I got to remember the numbers. It's 2 billion chickens annually just for the U.S. That's in 365 days, however many birds that is a day. That is insanity. And
that's insane.
Yeah.
That's a lot of meat.
And I believe it's something like 80 million pigs. It's a very, very big number.
Sure.
So it's really interesting when you start looking through some of that stuff of what people need to survive.
So would you say that chicken is the most consumed meat in the U.S.?
By poundage, yes.
Yeah.
By poundage, yes. But interesting, fun question. What's the most consumed protein in the world?
God, I would say fish, maybe? Or?
Milk.
Really?
Milk is the highest consumed protein. It's the easiest one to get. What is the most consumed red meat in the world?
I'm going to go with beef on that.
Goats.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I've traveled the world quite a bit, and goat is on just about everybody's menu except for the U.S.
Yeah.
And if you go down south, you might find it in some of those, like El Paso or something.
The
you
chili
might find
down there is legit.
Yeah.
Well, an interesting thing to think about that process, if we put ag into a very sterile bucket,
Sure.
why is goat the most consumed red meat? Well, because goats also produce milk. So you get the goat to produce the milk until they're no longer producing milk, and then they're harvested for the meat.
Bobby, I just lost your camera.
Do you have some PETA protester in the basement?
I don't know. They might be next door.
Is there a cow guy here? Fuck that guy.
They followed you.
You got to put me before the wolf guy, dude. I'm way less controversial than the wolf guy.
Trust me.
That was dude, I'm from the Northwest. The wolf thing's been a thing for 15 years.
We're still rolling, so. Strike number 2. Third strike, we're just going to read. We're going to the bar next door.
I mean, do what you got to do.
Those are staggering numbers. I mean, that's one way to put a perspective on how dependent we are. Now, are we only feeding the U.S. or are we exporting a lot of that?
No, we export a very large amount of product, whether it's grain or vegetables or meat or cotton, any number of those things. And that's one of the bigger things when you start looking. There's a ton of people, we're just going to bounce around, I guess, in ag. A lot of people worry about subsidies. They worry about crop insurance. Oh, you're supporting farmers in a bad way. Mm-hmm. I get the message there. I certainly do. But the thing we have to understand is in a lot of positions, especially when we talk about world stability, we talk about political stability, our government uses our ability to produce goods to keep certain regions of the world stable.
Sure.
I mean, what do you think is going to happen after the Ukraine? Who has
Look
to
what's
pick
going
up
on
that
right
slack?
now.
Who has to pick up the slack? We're going to have to. There's going to be really poor nations across Africa, areas that the Ukraine and Russia, who produce 30% of the world's wheat, it's not a small number, need to flow to.
Sure.
We're going to have to pick that up, and that's going to be done. Some of that's going to be covered in subsidies. Not now, later, because the weird dynamic of the business is fertilizer. I don't know if you've seen the data points on this.
Yeah, me and Jeremy were actually talking about this yesterday prior to you coming in, and just I'm wondering how that's going to affect. I mean, across the board, fuel too, right? Mm-hmm. You guys have equipment you got to run.
Well, luckily on the cattle side, we got horses, so everything we do is horseback.
Okay.
So if you look at for instance, the fertilizer issue, Russia exports like some crazy high percentage of the world's fertilizer for use in producing crops. Well, that's going to diminish your output as a system. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have less food, not to mention what may or may not come out of Russia and the Ukraine due to lost harvest from war, which is a real thing. And as you start to trickle all that down, who's going to get affected? And then what happens, especially later on, if we think of a bell curve, the price of a product comes up over time and then it comes down. Well, the price of fertilizer tracks right behind that product price. So if you're tracking corn, the price of fertilizer traces behind that, because as corn gets more expensive, they can charge more for fertilizer. The problem is at the top of that curve, when the commodity price comes back down, the fertilizer price carries over the end, and now it's higher all the way down the curve.
So where are we at in that curve currently?
Man, nobody knows. If I knew that, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be on a boat in the Keys. The market's closed. I'd probably be fishing right now.
Sure.
But that's the problem, and that's where some of those crop insurance programs or yield programs or any number of different things exist, is to try to protect the farmers, because the sheer math behind it is nobody's getting rich farming. For the most part, if you are able to cover your land payment and live on the appreciation of your property, you're doing pretty good. Mm-hmm. That's just the
So
brass
who's
tacks.
making the money? Is it the middleman or?
No, it's the person that's closest to the consumer.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
If you're if you're Barilla Pasta and you make noodles, you have packaging, you have processing, you have grain origination, you have all these other steps. You get to take 10, 20, 30% on all the way down the chain. Where the farmer buys everything at retail and sells everything at wholesale. So, back to our original conversation, craft beef, Colorado Craft Beef, our company came out of that same model. We don't want to be a price taker. We are a price maker. We hold our connection to our own customer. We sell at retail.
And you guys are direct to consumer in the U.S., right? You ship
Yep.
from does it come directly from your ranch to their door, or is there a processing?
80 feet from my house.
Really?
Yeah,
That's amazing.
We have a building on the ranch that we put up. We've got the same certification as a grocery store. I've got a big walk-in freezer. We can hold like 40 animals in there. And then it's all packed Thursday, Friday, the week before. It ices all weekend in the freezer, and it all goes to FedEx on Monday. The only state we haven't shipped to yet is Alaska. We had one dude from Alaska request a box, and of all the places, like, he's in the hardest state to get to, and he's on Kodiak Island. I was like, son of a bitch, man. Like, you're in the hardest state and the hardest spot, and he wanted like this awkward order, and I sent him the freight, and he just never replied.
Sure.
But, well, I mean, we've got subscribers in Hawaii. We do quite a bit of beef sales in Florida and Texas for some reason. I thought they had enough beef down there.
Wow.
Chicago's been pretty big. Denver, of course, we do a fair amount through Colorado and on the Front Range.
Sure.
And then a lot in California. We send a lot of stuff out there.
So that process, you guys are taking them directly from calves to raise cattle. Like, how much do you have to produce for you to be able to supply your customers? Especially, like, I'm sure that you saw some sort of increase during this pandemic because meat was a high commodity, right?
We tripled the year of COVID.
Really?
That was a fun mathematical exercise.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. How do you stay ahead of that?
I'm really good at Excel. So I played with Microsoft Excel. We were back ordered for like 8 months, and I just burned up emails with customers,
Sure.
making sure they knew the expectation and meeting their expectations and communicating in a way that I'm really fortunate. I come from a corporate sales background. I already knew how to do that. So I was able to implement some stuff that was just totally probably out of the world of what a lot of the people in our space do. We got through that, and then we just kept scaling up. The good news was, going into the pandemic, we had our shipping figured out. We had boxes figured out. Cattle is our least concern. We can get as many cattle as we want. But to your question, the one thing we don't do is have our own calves. So we don't have mother cows. The ranch we're on is not set up for that. So most people would say, well, it's just buy cows, put them there. Well, not really.
Yeah. A bit more involved.
Yeah, the ground isn't good for that. But then from an economic standpoint, we don't have any farm ground. We do no farming. So most cow guys, which is mother cow owners, they put their cows on corn stalks from the year before over the winter. That's where they winter them. They can feed them there. They don't overcompact soil. They don't waste pasture ground. Where we have no farm ground, we can't produce our own feed, which means we can't carry them all year without shipping them somewhere. Mm-hmm. So economically, it's not a great idea. So Colorado Craft Beef, we actually have 3 or 4 partner ranches that we've partnered with for multiple years, and we dictate our health protocols to them. We take their steer calves that meet the protocols. We know exactly who they came from. And they're all spoken for before they hit the ground. And then they move over to our place. We get them weaned. We get them backgrounded. We get them straight. They go out on grass here in another few weeks. So mid-April, they'll go out on grass until August, September, depending on when the rain stops. And then they'll come off grass. They'll go into a feed yard. They get finished, and then they go in and become a steak.
Okay. Now, do you supply, besides just direct to people's doorsteps, are you supplying any sort of restaurants or chains? Or I know Jason gets some meat from you, right? Like for certain things?
Yeah, Jason and I do some collaboration on the commercial ranch side. Nothing to do with craft beef.
Okay.
We've done some craft beef collaborations in the past. I think we're going to do some more in the future because he's just a lot of fun to work with.
He's an interesting dude, man. I love that guy.
I'll have to tell you some stuff offline.
Yeah, okay.
It was a great time.
Jason's episode 76 too.
Okay. Cool. Thanks,
Great.
Jeremy.
And so when we look through some of that stuff, we do we do occasionally provide some local restaurants near us with burger. Burger is one of the hardest things for us to get rid of, right? It's half of our volume, but everybody wants a ribeye. They don't want a burger. So we end up shipping or using burger in a couple different restaurants locally. We work with Double Wide Burgers in Fort Collins. So Dan, it's formerly Dan's Food Van. Okay. He uses all of our burger, and we're doing some other recipe development with him. And then actually the newly opened, I think they opened a day or two, Revolver food truck here in Denver. They're going to be doing quite a bit of stuff. Their menu looks to be pretty creative. They're going to be doing like some soul food.
Nice.
Soul food with beef. They're like, oh, you come and buy.
I'm like, hungry.
Right? But, from an economic standpoint, where the reason we do that, because it's something we didn't start doing until just recently, is as our boxes sell on the web or people buy certain things, we end up with overages. And since we're not food distribution, we had to find our own spots. So luckily, we've been able to reach out, and people in our network recommend other people over. So we've got a lot of friends in the brewing industry, so they meet the food truck guys, and it's all about relationships.
Hand in hand,
right?
Yeah.
Well, and if you're known for having good steak, it's not all bad.
Can we dive into your background a little bit? We started before I didn't hit record on this last one, but we kind of started into that. You have your degree from Colorado State, but prior to that, where did you grow up? You're not from Colorado, correct?
But
your wife is?
Yeah, my wife is fifth generation on the family ranch. So where we have Colorado craft beef, founded by her great-great-grandfather in 1913, originally as part of the Enlarged Homestead Act. 320 acres is now over 7,000. And my wife is fifth generation. Our two little girls are sixth generation. And Colorado Craft Beef's mission is to take the ranch and secure it for future generations. And, if we start talking conservation, all that, we can get into that. Sure. But I'm originally from Eastern Oregon. So you've heard of Pendleton Woolen Mills, maybe Pendleton Whiskey. Yep. That's my hometown. So Pendleton is a world-renowned rodeo town. Town of like 15,000 people that grows to 80,000 the week of the rodeo. It's consider it like Cheyenne, Wyoming. Same type of deal.
Okay.
Same type of rodeo. It's massive. So I came from there, went to junior college out there, transferred to CSU. And then throughout my career up until now, which I graduated from college almost 20 years ago now, it sounds horrible to say.
That's not that long ago.
Man, it feels like a long time.
Is CSU, sorry to stop you here, but is CSU still considered one of the leading agricultural schools? I just really butchered that. Agricultural schools in this country, or?
It is. They're very progressive. The interesting thing, though, ag is so multifaceted. It's like, what part of ag are they good at? Because if you want to talk cows, you want to go Texas Tech, Kansas State, maybe Texas A&M. You want to talk equine, CSU is like almost top of the list. I think Cornell's the only one that's better.
A lot of horse vets and stuff.
Yeah, and their vet school is just exceptional. I came from the Ag Business Program, so the DARE Department of Ag Resource and Economics. They're very highly regarded in the space. They do a lot of roundtable stuff kind of all over the country. So in some factors that CSU is focused on, they're very, very highly ranked. And then there's other schools that are great at other stuff too. I mean, you can't be great at everything, right?
You can try.
That means you're going to suck a little bit at everything too.
Yeah, so you go to CSU, and then how did you meet your wife and end up in Colorado? Did you meet her at school, or?
No, she went to school at Texas Tech.
Oh,
she
really?
got a master's degree in cow nutrition from West Texas A&M in Canyon, Texas, and then she moved to Boise, Idaho. And I had left Fort Collins and went to work for a company called Cargill, largest privately held company in the world at the time. Wow. And I was a grain operations manager. I ran big grain terminals, shipping grain to the ocean to be exported. And then from there, I moved back to Oregon, did a bunch of construction management jobs. I was a capital guy when I was with Cargill, and then did some other stuff and learned the corporate paperwork game, which, believe it or not, is like 80% of construction. Knowing how to actually build something's pretty minuscule. So I played the paperwork game, doing a lot of that. And then I was running an earthwork company in Oregon. And a bunch of us got invited to a concert with some girls we knew in Boise. And we loaded up a pickup and went to Boise. and there's like 20 of us that went to dinner. And my wife walked in in starched jeans and like Cayman boots. And I was like, who's that? And 2 months later, she went on a date with me. I only had to ask 3 times. I feel like that was a pretty low number. I mean, I told you she has a master's degree. She's no dummy, but I am persistent. So we went on a date, and the rest was history. We moved back to the family ranch in 2015. And in a conversation with her dad, that's where craft beef came from. We started talking about future of the ranch, what do we want it to be, business models, all the weird business nerd stuff that I do. And he said, you got to find a new way, and I don't know what it is.
How big of a concern is that for future generations to take over their parents' businesses? Because, I mean, it happened in my family. Mm-hmm. They homesteaded part of right here. It was a cattle ranch. I think 1 generation or 2 generations away decided they wanted to be in excavation. So they put the ranch up against excavation from my understanding, and had some bankruptcy issues and lost the ranch. So, and we're starting to see real estate is another thing that is crazy here right now.
Yeah, everywhere.
And we're starting to see a lot of these people come in like on the Western Slope and buy an entire ranch, but maybe they're just buying it for themselves and not to actually produce cattle and that sort of thing. So how big of a concern is that for us in general as a population, that, you know, as this world progresses, we're starting to see a decline in some of those spaces and those generations not wanting to take on that work?
So we could do a podcast on just that question alone. Sure. We've got a few fun data points for you.
Okay.
So when you say, why don't people come back to the farm? You know, if you know, God willing, one of my girls says, I want to take over the ranch, and we're in a position to do that. In 1976, for every dollar you put into agriculture, you got 35 cents back. Not bad. That same number today is 14 cents. Wow. So in a matter of 50 years, our profitability at the farm gate has been dynamited by 60%. So now if you've made effectively a third of the money you should have made for a generation, and those people didn't save well, or the market crushed them, or whatever may have happened, because farming's not easy work from an economic standpoint, you may not have the money or the position to let your kids take over. Maybe you have to work until you literally die on the farm. Mm-hmm.
Which is another thing is it's a business that you have to be very selfless in, right? Because it doesn't matter if it's snowing. It doesn't matter if it's Sunday. It doesn't matter if it's Christmas, especially if you're raising animals, right? They all got to eat. Mm-hmm. You know, we had John Masson from Mountain Primal, mm-hmm. and we talked about that a lot in his podcast, just, you know, what the demands are. And the reason why he went into it was to raise his kids with some of those values, you know, to understand that.
A buddy of mine told me this one time, and I took it to heart. I'd never thought of it like that. I grew up with livestock my whole life, not near to the extent that my wife did, but we always had cows and horses and, you know, 4-H pigs or whatever. And my buddy's comment, you know, shout out to Dawson if you listen to this, another CSU grad. He goes, I got to get out of town. He lives in Spokane. And he goes, I got to get out of town so that my daughter can have some cows or some sheep or something. I was like, is it really that critical? He goes, man, you know, you can't teach that level of commitment any other way. Wow, man, that's a data point I should have known, right?
Yeah.
This was just a couple of years ago. I said, what do you mean? He goes, yeah, she feeds the dog, but the dog's a friend. Your sheep depends on you, and that's really the only thing they need from you. Like, they're not your pal. Is like, that's a level of commitment and a level of teaching and selflessness that I don't know how to replicate. And I was like, yeah, you're right. You need to move the hell out of town. Great plan. And that's one of the things in ag, whether you're raising cattle or farming. I mean, if you miss an irrigation window in the summer, you could lose a field. It's no question, especially if you're doing something like produce in the Central Valley, or watermelons in Oregon, or almonds, or pistachios, or you get a hurricane. The pecan industry down in Georgia got smoked 2 years in a row on hurricanes. I mean, they came up the Florida coast and just wiped them out right during harvest. What do you do?
And that happens here a lot, right? With freezes and stuff. Like if we get an early freeze or a late freeze or something like that.
It depends on the crop. So some crops are more susceptible than others, like sugar beets, for instance. If sugar beets are still in the ground and it freezes, the top where you're used to seeing, you know, the sprouts come out of, If that freezes, you're dead in the water. They won't store. They'll rot as soon as you put them in the pile. So onions are the same way. Potatoes will survive because they're in the ground already. No big deal. So it's very dependent on the type of product you're doing, very dependent on your local market. Right. So if you're going to get an early freeze in Yuma, Colorado, out way east, basically on the Kansas border, Nebraska border, I don't know. It's way out there.
Way out there. Kind of by DIA.
Yeah. Dude, I'm 90 minutes from DIA.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah.
That's when everybody says, "Oh, how far are you from Denver?" I'm like, "I'm 90 minutes door to door from the airport." And they're like, "Which direction?" I'm like, "Not the direction you wanted to go."
Yeah. Because I think it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes from downtown.
Yeah.
Like that. But yeah, so going back to those generations, what are the concerns, and is there some sort of movement or some sort of, is the government involved in trying to regulate some pricing so you guys can make more of a profit, or how?
Do you want me to scare you?
Yeah, I do.
No, there's nothing out there like that. Here's the biggest problem. Back to your real estate question. From 1976 to 2016, the average downtown Manhattan real estate went a 10x. You bought it for $1 million in 76, it's worth $10 million in 2016.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And ag production ground in that same time period was a 16x. I know that. Mm-hmm. You don't think Bloomberg knows that? Why do you think Bill Gates is buying ground?
Sure.
All these guys are investing in it for the long-term return of appreciation. So some of the biggest land that's bought, for instance, I know of a 3,000-acre farm in the Yakima Valley in Washington that was recently purchased by a teachers trust fund out of Canada. They want it for asset appreciation. They want it to bankroll their pensions. It's a great investment. Well, the problem is there's so much money coming into that market, whether you're, ex-celebrity that wants to have a ranch somewhere, or you're just an investor that says, "Oh, I can buy that." It's running the price up to the point. This is a great case study. When Kara and I moved back, we found a ranch. We're like, that'd be really cool. It's not too far from the family ranch. I started playing with some of the numbers. You couldn't cover the note on the ranch with what you could make on the cows, and that doesn't count buying the cows. Wow. So it's a non-starter.
So it's a generational thing. I mean, you really have to be there from homesteading.
Or you have to have money that you can put on the table and let it sit there, because you have to pay to play. So what's happening now, especially on the ag production side, if X investor out of Dallas buys a corn farm in central Nebraska, they don't care. They're not going to farm it. There's any number of young producers that will lease the ground to produce the corn, so production stays the same rate, and they may make enough to feed their family, but they're never going to be wealthy because they don't own the ground that's appreciating. So economically, the people who are actually producing the food are getting the least benefit. And that is why Colorado craft beef exists.
Okay.
Because we want to be there to talk about this.
Sure.
Craft beef allows me to come have these conversations, or fly to wherever to do another podcast to talk about ag, to, raise awareness of what's going on. Because if we really start changing this system, we saw what happened with COVID. And I'm not saying COVID was that bad or that good. I'm just saying the disruptions we saw in COVID and the amount of supply chain issues we saw at the grocery store.
It's crazy.
If you get a real problem that starts dynamiting real systems, man, that's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Because what happened during COVID, let's just take the beef market, for example. We weren't out of beef. We were out of trucks. And we're out of trucks today, and we were out of trucks before COVID. It's a just-in-time delivery system. That's how it's designed. So if you go to the grocery store here in Evergreen, that grocery store likely gets 1 or 2 protein deliveries a week on a certain day, and the week before they have to tell them what they need. No problem. It works fine until everybody in Evergreen buys a month's worth of stuff.
Right.
There's no other trucks. You can't say, "Hey, I'm out, send another truck." Those trucks don't exist. It's just-in-time delivery. So if you have some sort of a trucking issue, or a freeway gets, smoked, or, think of this.
How about a cyber attack? We lost what was it, last month, Jeremy? I'm trying to think. We lost, I think it was most of the state of
Cell
Colorado.
service went down?
Yeah,
That
cell
was
service
creepy.
went down, so internet went down here. And I think I talked to, I know a snowcat operator down in Telluride. He was like, yeah, I was out down there too.
Where was that? I didn't hear about that.
This was 2 months ago, I think, roughly. And we lost it for over 24 hours, right? It's pretty much the entire Rocky Mountain range in Colorado, yeah.
They said it was from what I heard, there was some sort of construction going on, and they cut a line in Littleton. I think it was Littleton.
That easy, huh?
That was
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Some guy, he unplugged a Cat 5
But I
cable.
mean, it was pandemonium. You couldn't go to the store and buy anything. You couldn't, you
Yeah.
know, some of the traffic lights didn't work.
Because they can't open
I couldn't
the
get a
cash
hold of
register for
Jeremy.
cash,
We couldn't
right?
have a podcast, you know. It was just like
Right.
full on.
You were sitting on your, what were you saying?
Oh, I was convinced it was Russia. Yeah. And this
He
is
was sitting
before
on his-
the Ukrainian thing.
He was sitting on his
right?
porch with a gun.
No, I wasn't quite that bad.
No, he was still inside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't come to your house, dude. I was worried you were going to shoot me.
But and everything is that fragile.
Yeah.
You know,
It really is.
internet goes out. Well, society can still function, right? Well, no, because Walmart can't take money
Yeah.
because their system won't allow it.
Can't talk back on an FM radio, can you?
Right. And so it's one of those things when we start thinking about the systems that make us function, what do? I mean, what if that had been the power?
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. If there would have been power on top of that, it
Mhm.
would have been.
Well, there's a gentleman, Micah Fink. He's a retired SEAL. He runs Horses and Heroes.
Yeah.
Great dude.
Awesome guy.
He was on Jocko's podcast not long ago. He and I have talked a few times, and he goes, when he was on Jocko's podcast like last month, he goes, "What happens if we lose power in New York for a week?
Oh, yeah.
You can't get out. You have
Well,
no
look
gas.
at what's going on in Ukraine right now. I
Yeah.
mean, some of those people are dying now because they're freezing to death basically in their apartments
Yeah,
because the
And-
power's been out for
exactly.
2 weeks, and then we got a cold spell. So
And that's where I really think, you know, woke culture or whatever you want to call it, I do want to be mindful. I do want to be as much of a conservationist as I can be. But as a society, we owe it to ourselves to be realists as well
100%.
and try to maybe not consume so much, but put back. And that's the mission of the beef company is how do we share with people the ag story? You know, I know hundreds of farmers, whether they're, you know, hog farmers in Iowa or pecan farmers in Georgia. I mean, some of the funnest people I know. And they're like standing in their box and they're annoyed because nobody respects what they do. And it's like, well, is that going to help change anything? No. And that's why we're doing what we're doing.
100%. And how are you perceived by that community? Is that something that they're open to, or are you getting pushback, or how does that work?
So, man, I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. It's the way that most known groups look at, you know, I don't want to call myself an up and comer, but they look at the guy with the new idea and they're like, oh, whatever, kid, good luck. I mean, I know there's a ton of people I know that have listened to the podcast and like, yeah, what good are you doing? I'm like, man, if one person heard it, whatever.
Sure.
Like, for the most part, the production ag people, the people in the trenches actually doing the work, are like, hey, I'm glad you're doing something. The weirdest part, though, for instance, if we take the fee structure of a animal harvest tag in whatever state, there's a percentage for this group and a percentage for that group. That exists in ag as well. For every bushel you move of a certain grain, there's a checkoff amount taken by the government and given to the wheat checkoff or the beef checkoff. So every animal we move, we have to get brand inspected. $1 off of every one of those animals goes to the beef checkoff. Beef,
Is that a government-run agency or federally mandated, or how does?
I think it's technically a nonprofit, but it's funded from this government action to raise awareness, and they then allocate all that money to people like NCBA or cattlemen's groups or lobbying at the Capitol for good ag practices.
A lot of the shit comes down to the ballot box too. That's what's
For sure.
frightening.
Well,
you know, with biology as well.
yeah.
It drives me insane.
Well, and the weird thing with somebody like NCBA to like, how does the message received? NCBA, the Cotton Council, every one of these groups has their own talking points. And since I'm not approved on any of their lists, they don't share any of my data, even though my data is just the data. It's not
but
my
I think
mission.
that you'll get the most reach doing it the way that you're doing it. They're probably going to mainstream media, I would imagine, right?
Well, and they kind of have a social media following.
Okay.
But the interesting part, and this is actually after I went to and on the Cleared Hot podcast.
Love Andy Stump, by the way. So shout out.
He's a great dude. And, kudos to him for giving people a voice. Him and Jocko and Joe Rogan. And, maybe they don't always agree with people. Maybe they think you're a little...
But that's the best part about him.
Absolutely.
It's honesty, right?
Like maybe I walk out of here today and you go, what a load of horse shit from that guy.
Yeah, I can't wait for you to go around and tell all them how bad we fucked up and are not professional.
Not worried about that. But so I was pumped to go on Andy's podcast. His reach is crazy.
Yeah.
And I reached out to every corner of agriculture I can touch. I mean, people I've known for years. I got data from the pork industry, from the chicken people. I got all sorts of data. I showed up to Andy's with a notebook, and if you listen to the podcast, he opens with, so nobody's ever brought a notebook to my podcast. And I was like, yeah.
You didn't bring it to mine.
That's because I banged it into my head so far. But so we talked through all this different stuff, and there were all these all these organizations that knew I was going on the podcast. I shared it all back to them. We tagged them in social media, and they didn't share it again.
Really?
Yeah, that's what drives me crazy. I don't care that it's my message. I don't care that it's me. I'm not asking for anybody to, pump me out there.
Right.
What I'm saying is I'm trying to reach out for ag in a way that doesn't demonize agriculture. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Perfect is a stupid word. But, NCBA that I knows that I went on that podcast didn't share it. And I specifically talked to people at other state organizations that said, I'm super excited for you to go, like a guy that helped on the PAWS Act to get the PAWS Act defeated.
What is that act exactly?
I'll share that in a second. That's a whole other, it's dead now, so it's okay. But he's like, yeah, I'm super excited. And he sent us a message saying, hey, great podcast. And his organization never shared it. Not one organizational share in the ag community. So my biggest argument is you can't get an aggregated voice in agriculture. Sure. Because everybody wants to talk about their own stuff. Like, yeah, my beef company's fun. I really enjoy what it does. It's growing. I'm excited. But my beef company doesn't exist if people don't like ag. And if people don't want to understand where their food comes from and make informed decisions, whether you want my product or not, make an informed decision. If you want to be a vegan, great. If you want to eat Beyond Burger, do what you got to do. Yeah. But be informed. Understand where all that comes from.
And I think that was another reason why I wanted to have you on, because you right out of the gate said, hey, I'm not coming on just to talk about my business or what we do. I mean, that's great what you guys do. I think it's amazing. I think anybody should check you guys out.
I actually had a marketing buddy of mine listen to the podcast with Stumpf, and he goes, bro, you were 58 minutes in before you mentioned your company name. And I was like, oh, whoops. I was like,
you're here for the bigger message, I think.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and in all fairness, I rolled jiu-jitsu with Andy for like 2 hours before we went to the podcast. So
how was that?
I didn't actually get a roll with Andy. I rolled with a bunch of guys in his gym. SBG is a great school. I mean, he rolls at SBG in Kalispell.
Oh, they have an SBG in Kalispell?
And Whitefish.
That's crazy.
Yeah, Travis Davidson's the prof that runs both of those.
We need one in
I know some guys.
Yeah.
I'll hook you up. Paul Sharp's one of the founders, man. I'll help you out. Paul Sharp's a good dude. Don't roll with him, man. He's vicious.
Is he down the hill?
No, he's in Idaho.
Okay.
He runs SBG in Boise. Okay. So I train at Compound in Denver.
Nice.
So I train at Compound, Denver, and then Compound has another location at Littleton. And it was referred to me by another black belt friend of mine that's up in Chicago. But great spot. Yeah, good time.
Flirting with finding a new gym. So,
dude,
class I'm having a hard time.
Class is like an hour after I get done here. Yeah. Just come down the mountain with me. You just tap, or we'll wake you up. It's no big thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's just interesting when you start connecting everything and trying to understand where it all comes from. Like nothing can be perfect if the system's going to operate. Sure. And that's in ag. That's in, tech. It's all of it. If you want one thing to be perfect, something else has to suffer.
Yeah.
So
can we dive into a little bit, just because I don't quite understand, and I get mixed information. So I had a couple questions that kind of came to mind with somebody with your knowledge sitting across from me. GMOs.
Mm-hmm.
There's all kinds of crazy uproar about GMOs. It feels like it's kind of fizzled out a little bit. How are you supposed to, I know that you can read a label. I found that labels aren't always 100% true. One reason why I don't buy beef from the grocery store anymore is because I found out that some of it that might have had a USA stamp on it may not actually be coming from the U.S. Mm-hmm. It may be coming from South America someplace. So just certain things like that. But can we dive into GMOs a little bit, or do you know much about that?
So if you could pull up on your really fancy screen here, GMO approved products in the U.S. How many do you think there are?
Oh, God, I don't know. Maybe 1,000?
There's 10.
What?
Yeah.
So corn would be one of those, right?
Click on images.
Corn, potatoes.
Yep.
Maybe tomatoes. I don't know.
There you go. There's your 10. Corn.
Okay, so cotton.
Yeah, corn, soybeans, cotton, canola, peanuts.
Apples.
And actually that's not, yeah, there you go. Papaya, cotton, potatoes, sugar beets, alfalfa, and the bottom one is apples. Okay, so if we scroll back down to the image, so most people associate GMOs, which stands for genetically modified organism, just so everybody's keeping up. They associate it with being Roundup resistant. So you're resistant to pesticides, or actually that Roundup is a herbicide. So herbicide kills plants, pesticide kills bugs. Just to break down the chemicals, that's kind of the two lines they operate within. And genetic modification is done through selective breeding to get isolated traits for certain reasons. So for instance, apples are genetically modified so they don't bruise as easy. So when you cut them, they don't turn brown immediately and oxidize, so you don't throw them away. It's done to minimize food risk or food loss. Potatoes are the same way. The genetic modification in alfalfa is to make a low lignin variety, because lignin is the protein in the stalk that makes it stiff. And if it gets too stiff, the hay isn't any good. So if you're growing hay in the mountains and you have bad weather for 2 weeks and the lignin gets too high, the hay is not going to be any good. So they have this low lignin variety to give you like a month to harvest it. And they do have Roundup Ready alfalfa and things of that nature. So the reason that you would want Roundup resistant crops is for the same thing we've been talking about, is conservation. And we will get into Roundup in just a second, because I know there's probably some people screaming at their speakers right now.
Questions about that, because you can go to Home Depot and buy gallons of it.
Well, that's the problem, is usually the consumer is the biggest misuser, not commercial agriculture.
Okay, we'll dive into that here in a second. Let's finish with GMOs.
Yeah. So the GMO issue, for instance, if you want to plant no-till planting. So we're not cultivating the ground, because when we cultivate the ground and we till it up, all the carbon that's trapped in that soil is released. That's not what we want to do, right? We want to retain carbon in the soil. We want to retain that soil profile so it has the carbon, it has the old plant roots that have decomposed, so you can hold more water. The second we break that soil up and we turn it over, it oxidizes, all the carbon comes out, and then you actually won't retain as much water. It's not as ideal. So but you will get weeds, right? You get volunteer weeds everywhere. So you can till and release carbon, or you can spray Roundup to kill the weeds before you plant. It's called spraying it out before you plant it. To give you an idea, if you take the concentrate Roundup you mentioned at Home Depot, and you take a gallon of it, 32 ounces will go on an acre.
Really?
Yeah, it's very, very low in a commercial application. Now, I will clarify that. It's low on a commercial application for an acre, but when you do a few thousand acres in the same spot, that's a shitload of product.
So the shit that's in the spray bottle, right, that people just on their dandelions or whatever.
That's already blended down.
It is. Okay.
Yeah, that's already blended down.
Okay. Okay.
But if you buy the super concentrate, which is what farmers get because they're mixing a 1,200 gallon tank,
Right.
they'll say that it'll be a ratio. You need 30 to 40 ounces per acre. Now, the interesting part, the active ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate. Glyphosate is what actually kills the plant. In a 32 ounce jug of glyphosate, hold on, let me back up the math. I don't want to misstate this. Yeah,
I'm trying to follow you here.
1 square foot of earth when you spray at recommended density of product, recommended concentrations, is like less than a gram of product. So less than a gram. Now, it's still a lot when you're doing huge fields and you're doing all of them together. I get that. There could be runoff issues, but it's very, very, very low.
Okay.
So Roundup was used for those reasons, and that's why a lot of that stuff exists.
Let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me finish.
Which is frightening.
So So the main message there is, and then to top that off, if we take Roundup away, the next thing we have to use is gramoxone, and that is way worse than Roundup. And actually, if you Google Roundup, Oregon State University has a paper they published in 2006 that says Roundup is not metabolized by mammals. So if you listen to some of the farmers that work around this stuff every day, they will tell you that the thing that actually happens if you get Roundup where you shouldn't, that gives you diarrhea, is actually the surfactant in the Roundup. And surfactant is just a soap. It makes it stick to the plant.
So it's not the actual chemical.
That is what I have heard. That is what I have read. But if you listen to Rogan had a guy on like early this spring that wrote a book about Monsanto called Seed Money.
Okay.
He had a totally different narrative.
I haven't listened to it.
It's a great episode. I forgot the guy's name, but look up the book Seed Money. It's legit. Listening to that guy was great. I'd love to talk to him just to understand, his perspective. Because his perspective, it sounded like he did a ton of research. I don't disagree with his points. I would just like to understand the math. Like if we have to not use X, Y, or Z product, what is the impact? Sure. Because if we now have to till all this other ground, what do we do for carbon? I mean, so my final message is Roundup's not great. The chemical alternative to Roundup is way worse. And tilling isn't great either. So we need to do a better...
Compared to the normal... Okay, you drive down the hill, right, or into any subdivision, and you all have perfectly groomed grass, landscapers that are coming by. There's no weeds. Golf courses. There's a ton of golf courses around here.
Sure.
How much Roundup are they using compared to...
So I have a stat on that.
Okay.
It's on my phone over there, but there's a
You want it?
Yeah.
Jeremy will grab it for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I'll look it up real quick.
Because I'm curious, because I would...
Well, I appreciate the question because what you're doing is you're listening to what I'm saying, right? Like, well, hold on. There's other places this stuff is used.
I might be a dumb mountain guy, but I have common sense.
Right. Like, well, we're not using it on the farm. What are we doing that this other stuff is being used at? There it is. No, it's not there. I got to get back. There you go.
Good. Take your time.
Homes, golf courses, and parks grow more acres of turf grass than U.S. farmers devote to corn, wheat, and fruit trees nationwide.
That's crazy.
Homeowners use up to 10 times more chemical pesticides per acre on their lawn than farmers use on crops. Nearly 80 million pounds of pesticides are applied on U.S. lawns annually. On top of this, 90 million pounds of chemical fertilizers are used, and 26.7 million tons of air pollutants from mowing are introduced annually. Yale University has estimated the United States uses more than 600 million gallons of fuel to mow and trim lawns annually. And the flip side of that is to grow your yard takes 10 times more water than corn. And corn has a lower growing season, has a shorter growing season. So if we're talking about resource use...
So if we're doing the math on carbon footprint, right?
Exactly. And let's be fair. How do you mix your Roundup if you need to spray weeds at home?
I don't spray. I live in the mountains, so just let it fucking go.
You guys might
pick up the pine needles. That's about it.
Right.
And so the pine catch on fire. I cut the grass so predators don't come in and we don't have wildfire danger, and trim the trees. And then
there you go.
That's why I live here.
Well, but have you seen there's some articles out that they're pulling Roundup from like Home Depot.
Okay. No, I haven't.
Yeah, they're going to pull it for commercial or for consumer use. Well, the reason is the percentages of the use are astronomical.
Oh, it's misuse, right? Like I would almost bet that all the fertilizers and stuff are overused. It's oversold, right? Because you can go in and buy a 40-pound bag of it.
Yeah. And that's the bigger issue. Right. It's not the farmer, because I mean, like we mentioned, they're buying that stuff. Roundup is like, well, last year it was $15 a gallon, and I heard rumors this year it was going to be closer to $70 because of packaging issues and COVID and supply chain issues, because you can't get the bottles.
Because of shipping or just
it's
everything?
All of it.
It's all culminating. And what has that done to you guys at Colorado Craft Beef, to the consumer? I mean, are they... you've obviously seen shipping go up with demand, right?
Yeah, we've had to raise shipping. We're probably going to have to do it again. I hate to do it. Luckily, we have been able to hold our beef prices for the last 3 years. We have not changed the beef prices, and I don't think we're going to have to change them this year. That's part of being the direct-to-consumer part of it. So we've been.
That's how you stay in business, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And most everybody's been very understanding of the freight issues. Honestly, FedEx is our biggest problem. FedEx loses boxes or doesn't deliver them on time, and they don't back anything up. We got to eat it.
They don't?
No, they turn it. So they typically used to turn it off from Thanksgiving to New Year's Day, because Christmas, we're busy. We don't guarantee anything. I'm like, well, I get that. It's kind of cowardly, but fine. COVID hit, they turned it off. They still haven't turned it back on. They don't guarantee anything. Even if it's their fault, like categorically their fault, like they send it to the wrong state. And I'm only speaking from experience here. When I had a box going to Fort Collins, and my guy's like, hey man, it's not here, and it's in freaking Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm like, oh, it got on the wrong plane. I was like, cool, because it was supposed to get on a truck, man. Like you missed the mode of transportation. You didn't even miss like the city. you put it in the wrong damn container.
Yeah.
And that's just one of the things we have to suffer through. Not to mention they've had 40% rate hikes in the last 2 years.
Yeah, and they can't get anybody to work. Nobody wants to do that job, man.
Nobody wants to do any job. Yeah. So that's the biggest issue. I mean, that's the issue with oil pipelines right now. You can't get people that want to work. That's the issue in the packing industry.
Even mining. I mean, everything. All of it. Yeah.
Yeah. And
crazy.
Well, I mean, just down the road driving in today, I saw McDonald's right off I-70. It's like hiring at $18 an hour.
Crazy.
That's nuts.
With a guy begging for money out in front of it.
I didn't see him. Maybe he was on break.
Man. Every time he's there.
He gets his mandated 15-minute break, doesn't he?
So we talked about GMOs. My other one that totally confuses me is the whole organic debate, right? Like,
do you want to do
part of me wants me to put healthy shit in my body, right?
Do you want to do labels before organic or organic before labels?
Let's go labels.
All right.
Yeah? Is that the right? How would you do it?
Labels probably last. Let's do labels last.
Okay, cool. So it's your podcast. Let's go.
I'm trying to keep it linear so that people don't send me an email and be like, do you have Tourette's? Like, what is the deal?
I might.
Yeah, right. So organic is not bad. Organic produces less food per acre because you can't use some of the chemistry that's out there. And I mentioned this on Andy's podcast too, but it's a pretty big nugget that I got from a friend of mine in the chemical industry. I said, hey man, what would you say if you were going on Stump's podcast? And he goes, we got to talk about organic chemicals. And everybody goes, well, there's no such thing as organic chemicals. Oh, contraire, there are organic chemicals. There are a ton of organic chemicals. The problem is organic chemicals are typically the raw atom. They're the raw element. They will wreck your shit. They will rust your equipment. They will burn your hands. They are rough. But they're the raw chemical. They've not been industrial engineered with petrochemicals. So his message, which I thought was interesting, was I have 260 SKUs in my shop. He said 55 of them are labeled organic, and all 55 of those are labeled hazardous. They're the nastiest things we deal with.
Really?
He said, so Nothing against organic farming, but people need to know that stuff is sprayed too.
Sure.
And if you are an organic farmer and you are going to suffer massive crop failure, you can apply for a variance that says I have millworms or I have aphids or I have whatever. And we can, you can, as an organic producer, apply to have that changed and get a variance for that year and use a standard petrochemical and not have to change your label.
So what is truly organic then? Elk meat, maybe? I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah.
It depends on your definition, right? So organic in the scheme of things right now, before we get into labeling, typically means most people assume it's never been sprayed with chemicals. It's so much safer. It's not totally accurate. If you look at the organic beef chain, typically it has to be a fed organic feed, unless you can't get it. Then it's okay to still call it organic.
Really?
Yeah.
Makes no fucking sense.
That's the point.
To me.
That's why I want to do organic before labels.
Okay.
So if we look at labels, and if I tell you natural beef, what do you think? What's your thought on that?
I'm thinking it's a farm-raised cow that's naturally fed.
Okay.
No modifications.
All right. So in the cattle industry, live cows walking around, you're right. That is the word natural. No artificial no hormones. No added hormones. That's a fun caveat because everybody's like, no hormones. I'm like, everything has hormones.
Right.
Well, no, we didn't give it an implant.
And everything gets some sort of vaccination to live, right?
So but vaccination's not an antibiotic. So, a vaccination is different than antibiotics. All right. So if we're looking at just the beef industry, and you said natural beef is, naturally raised and no artificial hormones and no antibiotics, right? Vaccinations are not antibiotics. Vaccinations are preventative. Those are totally acceptable. And if you're not vaccinating your cattle or your livestock, you're crazy. We vaccinate everything. It's preventative, right?
Sure.
And by preventing, we no longer need antibiotics because ideally we won't have an issue. But if you go buy beef at the store, remember I said beef, not cattle, the word natural means something entirely different. So beef in a package, the word natural means no artificial ingredients, minimally processed. So where most people say, hey, this was raised naturally, right? Raised naturally, yes, but just because you're buying a beef package that says natural doesn't mean the same thing. It's different words. So that's all ran by the lobbies. So if you start looking at labels as a way to identify the nutritional value and the perceived value of the food you're buying, I would say that's perhaps misdirected. Not always. There's probably some great actors that do that. But understand that at Colorado Craft Beef, we have 0 labels. We don't have them. It's for me to get certified organic beef.
Ingredients are beef.
Yeah, but my cell phone's the top line of the website. I don't need to pay $20,000 a year to be certified. My prices are already high enough, according to some people.
Would that be organically certified when you say certified? Or?
Could be any number of things. Could be could be organic. It could be no hormones. It could be any number of things. And that's just a paperwork game. They come out once a year and inspect. Not saying they're not doing a good job, but what is really going on? If somebody chooses to skirt the system because they did the paperwork really good to get the label, they can do that. So my only advice with that is if you go to the grocery store and you find something that's packaged just super awesome, it's got all the different labels, it's got all the different, bells and whistles. Each one of those came with a cost.
Oh, you're paying for it big time. You go buy grass-fed organic beef and you walk, 10 feet down the aisle, the price just went up at least $15.
And I'm aware of at least 2 grass-fed burger lines that are old rope and steers from the rodeo.
Okay.
They're
not good cattle.
Well, I wouldn't say they're bad cattle,
Yeah.
but they're selling them under a premium, and they're not fed beef.
Right.
Like they're 7 or 8 year old rope and steers that they couldn't rope anymore because they get stale, and they collect them and they put them in a fancy package. So if the packaging matters that much, go one more step and find a producer. Not me. I don't have to be the producer. We don't do
There's
grass.
a lot of them out there now.
For sure.
Too. Yeah.
We don't do grass finished. We just don't. I'm not set up for it. We can't.
Yeah.
Grass finishing is something you do really well down in Georgia. But if you're buying that stuff and it's got white fat, it's not grass finished either.
Yeah.
I mean,
I actually prefer them grain finished.
yeah. And
Just
that's
the
and
flavor
that's the standard.
anyways, yeah.
Well, you get the fat flavor, and that's what it comes from. For sure. You got to have fat to run your brain.
We dove into a little bit of the cost of farming. How concerned are you in the recent situations with inflation? I mean, we've raised some concern already, and especially with what's going on in Ukraine now with the fertilizers and the wheat and all that sort of stuff. Is there a bunch of red flags that are going up? Is anybody looking at this? I mean, is the government stepping in any sort of fashion, or any of these organizations to head some of this off at the pass?
I haven't seen anything coming from the government. I would imagine there's some sort of relief out there, but prices are going up. That's good for the farmer.
Yeah.
The relief will have to come later when all the rest of the prices come down slower than the commodity price. You can actually hedge in the market from an economic standpoint. You can go lock in that $7 or $8 wheat price today. I'm more worried about the long-term effects. What's the ripple effect of this? Because right now is not a horrible deal, because in Texas they're starting to harvest in a couple months. And then we're going to harvest through, September, October. Mm-hmm. Well, what's going to happen in those underprivileged countries in Africa next year, next winter?
Right.
I mean, what's going to happen to the global supply chain? That's the bigger issue. I think here
Makes
we're going to be okay.
Sense.
Prices are going to be crazy. People are going to go out of business just like they do. Inflation's not helping anybody. Diesel prices are crazy. And when you're burning 100 gallons a day, $2 a gallon diesel swing really affects things.
Yeah, it's huge.
Yeah. And when everybody starts looking at, the cost of diesel and trucking, everything you get came on a truck.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if you buy from Amazon. It doesn't matter if you buy at Walmart or you go to, whatever.
Kind of baffles me that we haven't come up with a better system here, that like a rail system or some sort of
how do you
something. But how do you
get
a rail
everywhere?
On a truck? Yeah.
Yeah, you can't get a rail everywhere. I mean, you can get it to Denver and you can get it to a crossload facility.
Sure.
Or if you listen to who was the guy, Andrew Yang. He was talking UBI quite a while back, and he was talking about driverless trucks that would basically get to
scares the shit out of me.
Yeah.
It actually might be safer than some of these guys that are on I-70, honestly.
I totally agree. So
it might be.
But the way they basically said it was they would go from like outside of Des Moines to outside of Denver. Mm-hmm. And they would have bypasses around the major cities. They would try to miss, the population centers. Man, that's not a small undertaking either. That's billions upon billions of dollars. Or, the folks with the electric cars that were running out of battery power during that storm on the East Coast right after Christmas.
Sure.
We can go so many directions to make things better, but we can't lose common sense. At the end of the day, common sense has to be somewhere. Yeah. Somewhere common, maybe.
So my next question is about drought. I mean, we're seeing it at Lake Mead, some of these spots, and I know that there's not a lot of farms out there, but I'm sure that there's some sort of crops that are growing in Nevada and stuff. And we're lucky here in Colorado, we have headwaters, but a lot of our water is allocated to other states already. Like the flow of Roberts Tunnel just changed 2 years ago, I think, to go off the other side of the divide. And it was crazy what it did to the Platte and the trout population and all that sort of. There was this huge ripple effect.
So the bigger issue on the water side, drought sucks. Mm-hmm. But think of where Lake Mead flows to. That probably serves a city. Right?
Yeah.
What's that city going to do? That's what we're seeing in ag in Colorado right now. There's a ton of municipalities, Parker being one of them, that buys farm ground to take the water rights and use it for their population.
That's kind of what I was getting back to, is how does that affect you? Because these subdivisions and stuff like that are...
So it's twofold. Because Parker is a beautiful area. Sure. It was also great cattle country once.
Yeah.
It's not anymore. So now you have to go to less productive ground. Boise, Idaho is the same thing. Some of the most fertile ground in Idaho is that Treasure Valley where Boise is centered.
Sure.
And in general, agriculture is losing, and you can Google this just to double check, 20 years ago, it was 2.2 acres per minute being lost. I believe now it's closer to like 3.3 acres per minute being lost.
I mean, that was the whole reason, or the premise from starting this podcast, is helping to raise some of that awareness, because anywhere in the Rocky Mountain region, anywhere in rural areas, we're seeing growth. I mean, I don't know out by Fort Morgan or Akron, but I would imagine that there's subdivisions popping out there. I never thought that there would be subdivisions around DIA.
2002.
Yep, 2 in 2002, and I believe it's over 3 now.
Wow.
3 acres a minute of agricultural production ground being lost. So you do that, and then you start taking away water to populate cities.
That's wild.
And you kind of
Jeremy,
need...
can you screenshot that so we can throw it over the video?
You kind of need water to grow whatever.
Yeah.
You know, people say cows. Well, kind of. You need water to grow hay or grass or water the cows. You know, they'll consume 20 to 30 gallons a day in the summer.
Yeah.
It doesn't just go away. So as we start moving these resources around, we have to be very cognizant of where we're taking them from, because that ripple effect is going to hit like a Mike Tyson uppercut at some point.
100%. Yeah, that's mind-boggling, man. I think that there's... You'd have to check the number on this again, Jeremy, too, but I think when we started the podcast, it was, and it might have been because of the height of COVID, I think it was 10,000 people a month moving to the state of Colorado.
Yeah.
Just in general.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and all those people have
houses.
requirements,
yeah.
right?
They need more golf courses and...
Yeah. Well, in the other flip side of that,
and...
of the ag conversation, when people start taking great production ground and turning it into subdivisions, you have to move to less productive ground. Right. So now your carbon footprint per pound is higher because you can't use the good ground, because the good ground was used for development.
Yeah.
And, you know, the interesting thing, if you start looking at some of the other data, you know, the carbon footprint of ag actually in the last 40 or 50 years is significantly lower, with production significantly higher per unit. We're getting much, much more efficient. We're using less water. We're using less land. I believe the number was from 1990 to 2010. The 5 major crops, cotton, corn, you know, all the standard ones, to produce the same amount of product we're producing today with the technology from 1990, we would need 100 million more acres of arable farm ground.
Good luck.
So when you ask about GMOs or should we use chemicals, I wish we didn't have to. I wish there was a better way. But the population growth and the demands of a population that likes to eat 3 times a day demands that level of production. So can we be better about food waste? Can we be better about reusing things? Can we not throw things away so quickly? What can we as a society do instead of pointing at the producer?
It's crazy how much food gets wasted.
Yeah, it's like 33% or something stupid.
And that's one thing, I think, another reason why I hunt is I feel that connection to where I don't waste any of it, or very minimal, right? I mean, if I'm going to waste it, the dog's going to get the scraps, right?
Right.
That's kind of how it works. My best friend, you know, but man, this is frightening. It doesn't make me feel any better having you in here, but I appreciate your honesty and what you're doing. And any way that we can help here, I'd love to spread the message or whatever. So we're on this roller coaster ride with population growth, inflation. And what's the solution to help preserve agriculture and not make it to where it's going to cost the end user an arm and a leg to buy a loaf of bread or a jar of peanut butter or whatever? What are some answers, or how can the end user, the consumer, help this problem? Because I feel like we stand up for all kinds of different things, right? We're paying more in gas right now, and I'm seeing Ukraine flags spread all over the mountain towns here, you know, like stuff like that. We're okay with paying a little bit more at the pump. We're okay with, you know, if it's for a good cause. But what can the end user do as far as what products they're buying or how they shop, or maybe don't waste as much or consume as much? I mean,
the way I would describe it, and I've used this moniker a lot, is when you spend money, understand that every penny is a vote. Vote with your dollar. If you want to support Beats by Dre,
so true.
Do you. If you want to support the Sierra Club and you want to buy Coors beer because they support the Sierra Club, that's great. But don't just mindlessly spend money. Understand that everything you're doing is a vote. If you buy my beef or another guy next to me that does it a little differently, I'm not animalistic to either side of it. Hey man, do what's great for you, but quit blindly just walking through life consuming things. Vote with your dollar all the time.
Yeah, straight down to, it's crazy just the minerals and stuff that are in all this equipment right here that we're on, talking on and stuff like that, cars. And
a buddy of mine in recycling and I were talking, and he said that the weirdest part is saying old cars versus new cars. He goes, old cars used to have like 20 pounds of copper and decent metals in them, and now it's like 200.
Wow. Just from all the computers and shit like that. Right?
And then the other side of that is like,
that's why they cost so much.
Rhodium and cadmium and all the other crap that's in the exhaust systems. It used to be like 5 ounces and now it's like 25 ounces. And, understand this is another consumptive point. If you buy a new pickup, say you go buy a new F-150, that costs $60,000 today. If you buy the base model, it's pretty preposterous what they're charging for those now. The fact that we can buy them for $60,000 is incredible. With the amount of hours that go into that thing and the amount of engineering and,
how many minerals got to be pulled out of the ground and refined.
And why do we get to buy it for that? It's because they built a crap load of them efficiently.
Right.
And that's why you get to feed yourself so cheaply in the U.S. Because in the U.S., we're going to spend 8 to 9% of our disposable income on food. And in the rest of the world, it's 30 to 40 to 50%.
Sure. No, that's a great point. So what's next for you? You guys have anything coming up? Any special events? Anything that you're speaking at? Or are you doing more podcasts or anything like that?
I've got some more podcasts in the works. Always just looking to share the message. So I've kind of become I wouldn't even say become a de facto speaker for ag. I go around and talk shit and roll jiu-jitsu.
I love that.
Actually, it was like 3 separate weeks.
Makes me believe you.
Yeah. 3 separate weeks last fall, like in a row. I was traveling somewhere, doing a podcast and like out to dinner and, having a glass of whiskey and going to jiu-jitsu. And a buddy of mine's like, that's your job? I was like, I know, it's awesome, right?
Yeah. That's kind of like my gig. I tell people I hang out with cool people.
Yeah. Sorry to let you down today. So
come on, man.
But, it's been a lot of fun going and talking about ag and trying to spread the word, trying to do more to do that. Does that become a book? Does that become a podcast of my own? Gosh, I don't have time for that. I'd rather come hang out with people that have systems. Sure. I'll just go talk to somebody
if they
else.
Work.
It's been totally fine. It's only like 6 times now. Right. But becoming that spokesperson for ag has been a lot of fun in a way of doing outreach that really I never thought I could do. And trying to help people to understand, not educate them, not try to change their mind. I mean, there's still people that are going to say, I'm going to be vegan. I don't care what this cow guy says. I respect that. I really do.
Sure.
Be informed. And I'm happy to be part of that. And I'm happy to have that conversation. And I love my brothers and sisters in ag, but there's a lot of them that don't need to have that conversation and don't desire to either. So, if I got to go roll jiu-jitsu and talk to people, it's not a bad gig either.
Yeah, hell yeah. Well, I appreciate you doing it. And how can people follow you if they want, firsthand information from you? I know that you have an Instagram cage, should be a cage, right. Instagram page for Colorado craft beef. But do you have a personal one or anything where you're doing any of this ag stuff? Or?
I do. I have a personal one. I don't run it a whole lot. Like I think my last post was I was doing a consulting gig a couple weeks ago. And I posted a picture of a clipboard on like a set of steel stairs. And I said, are you a consultant if you don't have a clipboard? But there's our Instagram page. It's at Colorado Craft Beef. So probably the coolest picture if you scroll down, that's how we do birthdays. You just get a ribeye with a candle in it.
That's awesome.
But
if we
look at conservation, if you scroll up just a little bit, there you go, the green picture in the middle. Up. Yeah, up one more. And just play that video. That's actually the insulation we use for the beef company. It's a corn fiber insulation.
Oh, no shit. That's awesome, man.
So if we ship to downtown Denver, we ship to high rises, they can just wash the insulation down the drain.
Wow.
Totally
so you're
compostable.
doing it with dry ice and then this insulation.
Yeah. Well, it goes out actually with gel packs. So where we're at, we're so far out we can't get dry ice.
Right.
So
Okay.
So that insulation's been really cool. It's all
That is awesome, man.
It just dissolves in water. Or
Jeremy, can you screenshot that as well?
It works as a great fire starter too.
Yeah.
So.
Hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. So we do stuff like
really
that.
Cool.
We're active on all social. My personal Instagram is Jeff's Optic.
Man, you need a personal one just for what you're doing on the advocate side.
Yeah,
I think.
Well, we can pull that one up.
Yeah.
It's just
you need a website or something, or a book, or a.
One of these days, man.
Yeah.
There it is.
It's hard to find time, I'm sure, with everything you got going on.
So me and my humble. There you go. There's SBG when I was rolling with Andy.
Nice.
So a lot of cooking pictures on there. A lot of random
what's
stuff.
that handle?
Jeff's Optic.
Okay, perfect.
So Optic Consulting is the name of the consulting firm I've got. And then.
That's a great picture of you and your daughter.
You know, she thinks I'm pretty awesome. I'm sure when she's 14, she's going to think the same thing.
Right on.
And then you guys are always welcome at the ranch. If you scroll back up, down a little bit. A little more. Right there. Right side. Down.
Oh, nice.
Well, actually, that's a pretty good one, too. We'll have to pull that one up on YouTube. Yeah, click on that one. If you guys ever want to come out to the ranch, happy to feed you some of those if you know what they are.
Are those Rocky Mountain oysters?
Those are Rocky Mountain oysters.
I'm good, man. I've been to a few brandings before.
No.
I've seen some cowboys eating them raw, you know.
Well, those guys are idiots.
Yeah.
We eat them with cocktail sauce and Corona.
Okay.
and they're breaded.
They're good?
Yeah.
Okay. Breaded balls might be a little bit better.
My father-in-law, actually, the first
still
time
trying to choke them down.
The first time my father-in-law met me, we had Rocky Mountain oysters. I don't know if that was a message.
Right.
But so, man,
cool.
it's just been fun. I love the ag side. I love working out and, reaching out with people just to kind of discuss it.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate you coming up and visiting us. And listen, man, it's been great talking to you.
Yeah.
Sorry for all the technical issues we had today.
No,
we could have done 2 podcasts by the time we got all of our bugs worked out. But but yeah, maybe next time we'll have our shit together and be in this new space over here.
Well, and I might have some cool new data next time, or we'll have more vision on what's going to happen in national and international supply chains.
So real quick before we jump off, just let's share your website one more time.
Yep. ColoradoCraftBeef.com.
Okay. And you guys got beef in stock now? You can go.
We're stocked all the time.
Awesome.
So that's one of the things we've endeavored to do is always have stock. So we ship every Monday. We ship from the ranch to wherever you want to be. Everything's calculated on the website. Our summer sausage is doing really well. Obviously steak is a big one. If you want to get loaded up before it gets hot, that's great. Just
awesome, man.
Let me know. And if you've got any questions, like I said, my phone number is the top line of the website.
I'm sure I'll be hitting you up. I'll have some sort of ag question I can't answer on here.
There you go.
So. Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Of course, man.
Thanks everybody for listening. Jeremy, good? Thanks for listening to the Mountainside Podcast. If you haven't had a chance to do this already, please take a moment, follow, like, subscribe, or rate on whatever platform you catch the Mountainside Podcast at. Also, if you'd like some more information on upcoming episodes, safety tips, access to all of our affiliates, and all the badass discounts that we get here at the Mountainside Podcast, check out themountainsidepodcast.com. Mountainside Podcast is now available on Patreon. If you'd like access to bonus footage, behind-the-scenes content, ad-free listening, and much more, simply find the link in our bio or visit patreon.com/themountainside. There's nothing I love more than supporting America, showing my patriotism, and buying 100% American-made products. Origin Maine is one of the only companies that I've found out there that makes an incredible product that's 100% designed, produced, grown, built, and manufactured right here in the USA. So if you're looking for 100% American-made boots, high-quality denim, jiu-jitsu gis, rash guards, hoodies, bags, Jocko Clean Energy Fuel, supplements, and much more, look no further than OriginMaine.com. If you want to support the U.S. economy, the U.S. workforce, then you can 100% trust Origin and the amazing people that are running this company. And because they are a sponsor of the Mountainside Podcast, you as a listener can truly reap the benefits of buying American-made products at a discount. All you have to do is simply use promo code TMS at checkout, and you will receive 10% off your entire order every time that you visit OriginMaine.com. Once again, that's promo code TMS, the number 10, TMS10 at OriginMaine.com. We are also brought to you by Uncanna CBD. If you're looking to trust a natural solution, then look no further than Uncanna to help you curb anxiety, get better sleep, helping with long-term pain, joint mobility, muscle recovery, and many other benefits. Then you need to try a full spectrum or broad spectrum CBD, and the only brand that I trust is Uncanna. I use their products daily, and I can attest to you of how well it works. Uncanna is also veteran owned and operated and is just an incredible company that lives in the outdoors. Whether they're sponsoring professional rock climbers, dirt bikers, skiers, and many other athletes, helping veteran communities get outside, this is an incredible company with an incredible product. Because they are a sponsor here at the Mountainside Podcast, and you're listening to this ad right now, you can receive 10% off your entire order every time that you visit Uncanna.com. All you have to do is simply enter promo code TMS at checkout to receive 10% off your entire CBD order, apparel, canine products, or whatever Uncanna has to offer just by simply typing in the code TMS at checkout. Once again, that's promo code TMS at Uncanna.com. We are also brought to you by Onnit. Onnit is an amazing company based right here in the USA, helping humans reach peak performance mentally and physically. Listen, this is not just another supplement company with the same old, same old. Onnit's diverse lineup of products and supplements are backed by science and research. Onnit offers supplements to help sports performance, energy levels, your mood, sleep, brain function, focus, immune system, digestive health, and that's not all. Onnit also has amazing fitness programs, equipment, apparel, and you can now save 10% on all of it. Just visit onnit.com, that's ONNIT.com, and use the promo code TMS at checkout to receive 10% off your entire order.